my shoes and out the door. 5, I'm alive. 6, 7, 8, feeling great.
Are you ready to wake your inner goddess? This is Dr. Noah, 1/3 of your BYWG team. I have an exciting announcement. The full Getting to Goddess program is on summer sale for only $147. That's a savings of over $500. The direct link to save will be in the show notes. Enjoy the podcast. Hello and welcome back to Beyond Your Wildest Genes podcast. My name is Dr. Noah DeCoyer and I am your co-host. Today our guest is Evan DeMarco from Omax Health. It seems like everything is headed towards brain health, so I'm personally excited to have Evan on today. Now, rarely do I mention this prior to an interview or right at the beginning of an interview, but a special offer for what we're going to talk about today will be listed in our show notes, website, and emails, etc. when this podcast is released. So, Evan, how are you doing today?
I'm well. How you doing?
Fantastic. Let me do your bio and then we'll get started.
Sounds great.
Evan is a sports medicine and nutrition expert, published author, public speaker, and frequent guest on television, radio, and digital platforms. He is a successful entrepreneur whose interest in diet, health, and supplements began as an athlete and consumer determined to improve an industry that was going through massive transformation. Leveraging his sports background, his entrepreneurial success, and his thirst for knowledge, Evan returned to school to bio and organic chemistry and went on to develop a vastly improved formula for prenatal supplements delivered in liquid form. From there, he began to work on a supplement that would enhance the brain-building properties of his original formula, and that supplement is Alpha Omega Cognitive Boost. Evan worked directly with many of the top research scientists and doctors in the U.S. to build functional medicine platforms that combine the use of high-quality supplements with strategic and holistic approaches to treating illness and disease. He has brought dozens of products to the market, resulting in nearly $280 million in retail sales globally. He lives in Northern California with his daughter. So first things first, Evan, can you flesh that bio out a little bit? How did you get where you are today, and what's the backstory?
That's a pretty impressive bio. I need to thank whoever wrote that. Yeah, great question. Basically, I think, we all kind of have this idea of what we want to be when we grow up. And, interesting enough, my dad was a carpenter. He was a cabinet builder. He had this successful cabinet building business. But, he worked with his hands, and I saw that, and I saw just, how difficult it was. And I'm like, I kind of wanted to do the opposite of that. So I had this vision of like sitting in an office, wearing a 3-piece suit and, having people bring me, like stacks of paperwork. I thought that was cool. And then I did that, right? I go to college and I originally majored in English and journalism, and I didn't really like that. So then I'm like, I'll go into banking. That seemed like a great way to wear a suit. So I did that and then ended up becoming an investment banker, and I hated every minute of it. So it's one of those things, sometimes you get what you want, and, sometimes what you get is not exactly all that it's cracked up to be. So, kind of having this identity crisis and not really knowing what to do, I kind of returned to my roots, which was just sports, something that had always permeated my entire existence. And I was able to work with a sports nutrition company. As the bio indicated, I was doing it on a business development side, but I was really passionate about the product development side. I just didn't have the scientific chops to really go head to head with some of the scientists. But I could understand it's like they were creating these products that just didn't have market appeal, or they were creating these products that we couldn't deliver to market because they were so expensive or for any number of reasons. So I wanted to kind of marry my experience in marketing and business development and product, or in brand management, with the product development side. So that's where I ended up back in school and really started, understanding what it took to create great products in the marketplace. And after, kind of studying and really working hard in that respect, I was able to marry those two and really look at understanding the white space in the retail category. What does it take to create something of value that the consumers are going to, recognize as something they need in their daily lives? So I've been doing that for a long time, and obviously had a lot of success in developing some great products for the market. But the passion really for me kind of came in prenatals when I found out that I was going to be a father. And really looking at prenatals, I'm like, these things just suck. These are the same prenatals my mom was taking. That is an industry that has not evolved much in the last 30 years. So it was ready to be disrupted. It was ready to have someone come in and say, all right, what can we do better? How can we give our offspring every chance that we didn't get? And that's where the alpha and omega ingredient technology was born. I wanted something that was going to really give my daughter the best brain benefit she could possibly get.
Boy, there's a lot. There's a lot to talk about. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, cognitive function, prenatals, reducing inflammation, healing from CTE. How about just a real basic omega-3 101 for a few short minutes?
Great. That's a great place to start, right? So everyone knows omegas. And I think it's the number one seller in the supplement space. But a lot of people don't really fundamentally understand omegas. Is it fish oil? Is it omegas? EPA, DHA, DPA, ALA. So let's kind of take it back to just fish oil basics, right? Let's go to South America, off the coast of Chile and Peru, where predominantly anchovies and sardines being the source of omegas come from. And from there, those anchovies and sardines, most of them caught responsibly with sustainable fishing practices, are sent to a fish factory where they're literally just pressed, right? They're just put in this block, where you're just pressed and squeezed. And on one side you have oil, and on one side you have this fish meal. And that fish meal is sent out all over the world to fertilizer factories and pet food places. That oil that's left is what's commonly referred to as 1812 or crude oil. And that 1812 is really representative of the EPA and DHA concentration. 18% EPA, 12% DHA, for a total of about 30% omegas. The remaining 70% being things like pro-inflammatory omega-6, saturated fat, cholesterol, all of the things that we've kind of come to believe as bad fats. So if you go to Costco and you buy your 6-year supply of fish oil for $4, there's a big chance or a good chance that you're going to get that 1812 type of fish oil. And there's nothing wrong with it inherently, but when we start to look at the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, inherent in the modern Western diet, then we can start to see that might actually exacerbate some of these pro-inflammatory issues that we're seeing, especially within a certain segment of the population. So there are ways to concentrate fish oil up. There are ways to remove some of those bad fats, and you can get a 50% concentrate, a 60% concentrate, all the way up to almost 100%. And so what we really challenge people to do is not just fundamentally understand the benefits of fish oil, but really look at what you're putting in your body and look at those concentration levels, right? If you're at the back of your fish oil box says 1,000 milligrams fish oil, but only 180 milligrams of, omega-3, that's probably not going to be a good one. Look for a ratio that really is representative of what we need to be putting in our bodies to kind of deal with the inflammation problem that seems to be so systemic right now, especially the Western diet.
One of the things I tell my patients is that, certain supplements you could buy almost anywhere, like vitamin D3, you can buy that. You can buy that in Costco. But fish oil, from a standpoint of concentration, rancidity, you have to go to a professional and buy it at a reputable place, or it's going to do more damage than good. And I'm sure you feel the same way.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. The commodities, the vitamin Ds, the vitamin Es, those you can get anywhere. Those are all made in like one of 3 factories, and they're, just hundreds of millions of those soft gels or pills are popped out, and then it just becomes a marketing question, right? But when it comes to the things that really have a profound impact in our health and wellness journey, sometimes you just got to pay the piper. You got to step up, pay the couple extra bucks, and know that you're putting something of intrinsic value into your body.
Right. Now the 3 oils are EPA, DHA, and ALA. The 2 that you really want are EPA and DHA, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And we can there's actually DPA, which interestingly enough, if you look at Dr. Jorn Dyerberg, who's kind of considered the godfather of the Omega movement, he's the one that went out and lived with the Inuit population and really understood that their low incident of cardiovascular disease was systemic from this high polyunsaturated fatty acid diet, which at the time came predominantly from seal meat. Now, the issue with us and most societies is that we don't want to go out and club a baby seal for our polyunsaturated fatty acids. So we've kind of gone to fish and looked at the EPA and the DHA. But now, as technologies are improving, we're starting to see this hidden omega, the DPA, kind of come to the forefront. You have ALA as well, and that really becomes a fantastic topic of conversation. You've got a lot of vegans out there, vegetarians, whatnot. And I can't tell you the number of people who are like, oh, I'm great. I get my omegas from chia or flax. And interestingly enough, if you look at the omega concentration of chia versus like a fillet of salmon, there's more in it. The problem with ALA, though, as we know, is the conversion from ALA to more of an anti-inflammatory EPA through a metabolic process in the body happens at anywhere between 3 and 10%, depending on the person, the sex, the age, all of these different, these myriad of factors. So even though you think you're getting all of these great benefits from ALA, which come in the form of like the chia, the flax, the vegetarian sources, chances are you're not really hitting what the WHO, the FDA, all of these, bodies out there have really indicated as the minimum threshold for dietary intake of these polyunsaturated fatty acids.
Right. It's always a point of contention for me and my patients as well, just educating them on how important and how different EPA and DHA is. And there's nothing wrong with consuming ALA, but just know that you're not going to get a conversion into what you really want or what you really need or what your brain really needs for that matter.
Exactly.
Now, EPA more for inflammation, DHA more for brain health. Is that kind of how it goes, or is there a little bit more to it than that?
No, I mean, really, that's the nuts and bolts of it. It's funny, right? And this becomes an academic argument with 22,000 clinical research studies on omegas, polyunsaturated fatty acids. This becomes the shouting point in the academic community is which is better. We know that in prenatal, it's DHA. That's really what's generating, the brain development, the eye development. That's where we see that, in your eyes and in your brain is this largest concentration of DHA. And interestingly enough, when you look at breast milk and breastfeeding, what we find are these concentrations of DHA and alpha GPC, which we'll talk a little bit about in a second when we get more to the cognition piece. So interestingly enough, we've done this, we have this DHA concentration at the time in our lives when our brains are developing the most and where we have the most, need for these type of polyunsaturated fatty acids. And then academically, somewhere along the way, we started understanding it's like, well, EPA seems to have a general anti-inflammatory or inflammation resolution benefit. So it's one of those things, you'll ask 10 different people in the academic world who study this stuff and you'll get 10 different responses. I think it's just one of those things, start with quality. I'm kind of a 1-to-1 type of guy on the ratio of EPA to DHA. But it really becomes one of those things. I like to look at diagnostic tools, an omega index test, a blood lipid panel, and just really see where you're at. And then you can kind of custom tailor a supplement regimen based off of, where you're at and where your goals are.
Yeah, I want to get to that omega index, but last question, DPA, what's the difference there and where is that found? I'm not very familiar with that.
So DPA, again, its predominant source is seal meat, right? So it is an omega. It's really kind of, again, when we look at the metabolic process, DPA seems to be this hidden omega, this thing that's been the sleeper omega for a long time. But it seems to have a pretty profound impact on cardiovascular, structure, function, a lot of things that we associate omegas with, that healthy cardiovascular system. There seems to be a metabolic conversion in the body from EPA to DPA. So, a lot of research has been done on it like 30 years ago, and now we're starting to see, as the technology allows us to cultivate that particular fatty acid from fish, more research going into what are the inherent benefits of that. But again, it really becomes an academic conversation because as a lot of these companies are starting to understand, when we start to break these fatty acids down even further, then we get into these pro-resolving mediators, things that are really kind of the metabolic constituents of these omegas that seem to have even more of a profound impact in inflammation resolution. So it's a really exciting time in fish, and I realize how ridiculous that sounds. It's like, how do you talk about fish and get excited about it? But as we kind of really get into the science and we start to peel back the layers, we're really finding out how these things work and how we can utilize these to really extend a person's lifespan or quality of life, or just really look at how these things can have a profound impact in people's health and wellness journey.
So here's a direct quote from you. The average American's omega index is between 2 and 3. By getting an 8, you are 5 times more likely to reach your 80s without Alzheimer's, dementia, or cardiovascular disease. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the Omega Index, which comes from the Omega Quant company, and I don't know if we could throw a shout out to them, but if you just Google, okay, so Omega Quant, a fantastic company, and basically you go online, you get this test, they're going to send it to you in the mail. You do a quick finger prick, send in a blood sample, and you're going to get this really comprehensive report, different from what you would get if you go to your doctor and you get like a blood lipid profile. What it's going to show is the omega-6 to the omega-3 ratio. Now let's take a hop in a time machine and go back to 100 years, where we recognize that the average omega-6 to omega-3 ratio was right around 1 to 1. Then you kind of fast forward 100 years and it jumps to 4 to 1. And then you look at it now, and that's like 25 to 1. And that's that Western diet, right? It's so pro-inflammatory omega-6. In the proper ratios, you need both of those. But when we start to skew it so far in the wrong direction, as we've done now, we start to see some pretty negative, cardiovascular incidents, Alzheimer's incidents, all of these things that really are systemic from the inflammation issue. So what this report will tell you is what your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is, and then they have this score, and it's just a systemic number, right? It's all of the data points that they've accumulated over 30 years that go into this score that say you're here. And again, the average American right around a 2.5 to a 3. But that 30 years of data points to the fact that once you get to an 8, once you really start to modulate that omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, once you actually start to improve your omega intake, if you get to an 8, you are 5 times more likely to be an octogenarian without, incidences of cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, or dementia. And that's really it, right? If it's all well and good if we live to be 80, 90, 100, but if we're suffering through some of those things, quality of life becomes really the topic of conversation.
It does. Now, I have this conversation with my patients all the time as well. The low fat paradigm has done so much horrendous damage to our cognitive health, all sorts of different health parameters. Now, it's the right healthy fats, of course, the right types of saturated fats, the right types of omega-3s. But I just see it over and over and over again. So why do you consider supplementation essential for brain health? I mean, can we do this with just eating fish and chia seeds and flax seeds and getting algae, or is it that important to supplement?
That is a fantastic question, Noah, and I think when we really let's look at where the nature of supplements came from. 30, 40, 50 years ago, supplements kind of came onto the market as a way to supplement your diet. It's like, okay, perhaps lifestyle parameters, whatever the case, allowed us, said, we're not getting enough of these couple things. Maybe we should create something that a person could take. Well, that industry has skyrocketed to a point where now we've kind of created all of these supplements, these compound things, all of these unique and novel concepts. And that can be great, but it can also be dangerous. I also, when we kind of look back at where we need to be, especially with fish oil, with polyunsaturated fatty acids, my concern is that fish alone is not getting us there. The omega-6 ratio is causing a problem, so you're not really going to have enough omega-3s from your fish source or from your chia, your algae. But I also look at what we're doing to our planet, right? We've got the plastic issues in the ocean. We've got, environmental toxicity. There are certain companies in Japan that manufacture fish oil that are literally running Geiger counters over the fish once they're caught because of Fukushima. So, when we look at all of these different things, I think the truest nature of supplements needs to change. They almost need to be more essential than they are supplemental. And really the everything that we're doing to the environment that we live in is driving us down this path where if we're not supplementing properly, I think we're just at a distinct disadvantage. So to answer your question, I think it's absolutely essential that we incorporate the proper supplements into a healthy lifestyle. Now, the trick is, where are we getting our information, right? I can't tell you the number of people that call me like, oh, my mailman just gave me the greatest advice on supplements. Like, okay, well, I'm sure it was great advice, but if you're not custom tailoring a supplemental approach to yourself based off of good data, then at best you're just throwing money away. At worst, you could be doing something detrimental. So, really looking at blood work and working with a practitioner, your chiropractor, a doctor who's going to be able to take all of those data points and say, hey, this is where you're lacking and here's what you need to be doing.
Right. Now, you mentioned this a little bit in the beginning, but what does a consumer need to look at when purchasing any supplement, or specifically some form of fish oil or omega-3 fatty acid?
Yeah, unfortunately, the biggest driver in quality is going to be cost, and that's the unfortunate the unfortunate aspect of this. But if it sounds too good to be true from a cost perspective, it usually is. So I like to see something that's at least 80% concentrate or better. And the best way to say that is if you've got 1,000 milligrams of fish oil, you want total omegas at 800 or more. It's pretty simple math to do on the back of a box, and you can figure that out. The higher the concentration, the lower the cholesterol, the pro-inflammatory omega-6, the saturated fat, all the bad fats that we talk about. And then that's it. People can have these academic conversations about EPA versus DHA versus all of these. I think if you're kind of going down that journey of really just getting into something, I like to see a ratio that's representative of both the research that allows us to say anti-inflammatory or inflammation resolution and brain health, which means you're looking for EPA and DHA.
Okay. And for no specific condition, overall health and well-being, what is the optimal omega-3 supplementation amount? Is it 1 to 3 grams a day? Is it somewhere in that range?
Yeah, 1 to 3 grams. And I think, as people are just getting started, start with 1 gram a day, work your way up. Really the worst possible scenario if you take too much is you're going to have some GI upset. You might be running to the bathroom a little bit more than you want to. But start small, allow your body to develop that, develop its reaction to that, so to speak. And then just kind of, build it into a lifestyle parameter, build it into your daily regimen. I think 1 is a good starting place. A lot of it too depends on how active we are, right?
Right.
What we recognize is sarcopenia, age-related muscle protein breakdown, seems to be counteracted in a lot of ways, not only by increasing amino acid supplementation, but supplementing with omegas. So we know that omegas really help muscle protein synthesis, especially as we get older, late 20s, early 30s and on. So we all know that resistance training, getting into the gym, getting outside, being active is essential for the longevity equation. But now if we're supplementing properly with EPA, with DHA and amino acids, then we're really going to help kind of offset that sarcopenia issue.
Cool. That's really interesting. I just finished a 5-day fasting mimicking diet, and if you read the longevity diet, they talk about as you age, you do need to increase your protein, but they're talking about aging like when you're 60s or 70s. But that's the first time I heard anything about omega-3s helping with sustaining muscle as you age. That's really interesting. I'll have to take that in serious consideration.
Yeah, and I'll send you after this. I can send you some great clinical work on it. But yeah, I mean, sarcopenia is something that it's one of those things, right? I always look at the body in a lot of ways from the analogy of the car perspective. If you wait until your brakes are metal on metal, what's the cost of getting them fixed? Whereas if you're doing the maintenance all along, then you don't get hit with that giant bill at the end. And your body's a lot the same way. Is a lot of the signs of aging, whether it's physical, sarcopenia, muscle protein, whether it's your brain, all of those things, the degradation of those seems to start earlier on in life, but then we kind of have this past the point of no return, and that's whether you're 50, 60, 70, all of a sudden things just kind of instantly go from, tolerable to bad, like almost, overnight. So part of what we want to do is get people to understand what they need to start doing early on in life to maintain that health and wellness lifestyle that they really are looking forward to.
Totally agree. I have one last question before we get more into the specific formulations you've created. And this is a question that I get often from my patients. Difference between fish oils, krill oil, benefits between the both. What are your thoughts on that or ideas on that?
Yeah, the fun thing about krill is that it's got a natural phospholipid. And when we look at all these different types of oils, you're going to have ethyl esters and triglycerides and phospholipids, and all of it comes back to bioavailability, right? This buzzword that gets thrown around in the supplement industry, it's the latest buzzword. How much are you getting when you put it into your body? What's your absorption rate? What is your body doing with that is really what it boils down to. Now, krill, because of its phospholipid base, seems to have better bioavailability, but the omega construct or the omega dosage is a lot lower. So then it becomes one of those things you have to take a lot more. And that's a perfect segue into one of the things that I've really focused on, which is creating structured lipids, using the science right now to mimic what krill does. And I don't have an issue with krill. I just think it becomes one of those conversations of sustainability, of efficacy, and cost, because you do really have to increase your dosage to hit those minimum thresholds of what you would want for omega supplementation. If we kind of go back to one of the products that I'm particularly proud of, which was the origins of the prenatal that we talked about earlier, alpha and omega, taking a phospholipid, or in this case, a water phase phospholipid with alpha GPC and marrying that or binding that with an omega, we can systemically increase bioavailability. But then we have these myriad of other benefits, the brain benefit, lowering homocysteine and C-reactive protein, increasing growth hormone, all of the things that we can do scientifically and structurally now in a lab. Krill is there, but that's like, we're at version 10.0 and krill is version 1.0.
Right. And so that leads me into your products. What exactly is alpha GPC? And take a deep dive. What makes Omax and your formulas just better, more interesting, more beneficial?
Yeah. So another great question, right? So, fish oil is fish oil. And I was always really, once you get to that certain concentration level, and if you're doing it in the certain, the concentration, through supercritical or superfluid chromatography, where you're not using chemicals or harsh solvents to get rid of those bad fats, then it's just a question of marketing, right? Who's marketing the product the best? Well, I wanted something better. I wanted to 10x it. I wanted to disrupt that business. And the best way that I found out was, let's look at some of the science that exists now on bioavailability and then see if we can really tweak that. So what I found, interestingly enough, was a product called alpha GPC, or alpha glycerol phosphocholone. And this product is predominantly used as an active pharmaceutical ingredient in Europe to treat Alzheimer's and dementia. I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And then I found this report from the European Food Safety Agency that was talking about how the predominant choline source in breast milk was this alpha GPC. So I'm like, well, wait a second here. If this is at the time in our life that where our brains are developing the most, we're getting this kind of DHA and this kind of choline, why shouldn't we be taking that throughout our entire life? And then what we find when we look at this alpha GPC, which is a water phase phospholipid, or a phospholipid with the fatty acid tails removed, is that when we marry that with this DHA, we have this fantastic combination. It's a structured lipid that improves bioavailability, really has a profound impact on cognition, memory, focus, concentration. And then you get all of these other systemic benefits, like I said, of lowering homocysteine, lowering C-reactive protein, markers that are usually looked at to determine whether or not a person has that MTHFR mutation, which, research indicates is about 40 to 45% of the global population. Increasing growth hormone, lean muscle mass, improving nerve conduction velocity and cell-to-cell communication. It's like, this is krill, this is krill on steroids, basically. And so, as a prenatal, it was awesome. Now, as we look at it as a cognition product, moving forward for people who are really late 20s, early 30s, suffering from those like memory slips, what we would call like, oh, I'm too busy. I'm stressed out. I can't find my keys. I can't find my husband. those can all be systemic of decreases in acetylcholine. It can just be, systemic of the lifestyles that we're leading right now, but it's essential to start supplementing properly so that we can kind of combat some of those cognitive decline issues now before they get really out of hand.
Interesting. The only food that I know that is high in choline is egg yolks. Is that similar, or where are you deriving this alpha GPC from?
So you're right. Egg yolks is one of the best sources from that. Some of the other food sources are like beef liver, right? Not something that people throw on to their daily diet. So the way that we actually derive this is we take sunflower lecithin, put it in a reactor with potassium hydroxide. Basically, go through this whole enzymatic process, create something called phosphatidylcholine, and then that goes back into a reactor where we remove the fatty acid tails and replace those with a glycerol backbone. A lot of fun science for anyone who likes that. Otherwise, I'm sure half your audience just glazed over with that little explanation there. But you can get a lot of your choline from eggs, from beef liver, things like that. But as acetylcholine stores start to diminish more and more, it becomes necessary to supplement those. Now, choline bitartrate or choline salt, some of the things that you're going to find in like a general daily multivitamin, have clinically been proven to have zero impact on brain metabolism. So although those are great for certain biological functions, when we really want to talk about brain, keeping your brain healthy for as long as you're going to be on this planet doing what you want to do, we have to start looking at some of these phospholipid choline sources as really the truest way to support brain health.
Does it help with inflammation in the brain? Does it help with connections? Like how is that? Or does it reduce the amyloid plaques? Like what is it doing in the brain that's so different and special?
It does a lot of those things. We are looking at amyloid plaques and tangles. Really what are the precursors to Alzheimer's? It definitely helps with that. It helps repair myelin sheath, and so this alpha and omega becomes a dual mode of action, right? So you're with the alpha GPC, you're improving the cell-to-cell communication, your nerve conduction velocity, the way that your cells communicate, which is based off of speed, right? When you're younger, our cells are talking to each other really fast. And as we age, that communication starts to slow down. Part of that is having the neurotransmitter acetylcholine, which alpha GPC is the precursor to. But then when you throw the fatty acid in there, the DHA, now you've kind of surrounded your brain with this fatty acid bath where, you're improving the myelin sheath, the insulation around the cables where the cables that allow your brain to talk or your neurons to talk to each other. So you get this multi-mode of action, right? Everything that's really focused on improving the speed and the structure and the function of your brain. And then obviously preventing some of those beta amyloid plaques and tangles. Now, this is just one part of the equation, right? It's a great part, but one supplement alone isn't going to do it. There's a lot of other things that we talk about, and especially in the book that I just came out with on Better Brain for Life. How do we prevent a lot of cognitive decline? This is just one piece of it.
Right. And how do you deal with how do you keep your fish oil from staying fresh and not becoming rancid? What are your trademarks that you do in there to keep it as fresh as you possibly can in capsule form?
Oh, well, the first thing is argon. So that's one of the great things. A lot of companies that manufacture fish oil will use nitrogen to, it'll stay in kind of an oxygen-free environment, and they use nitrogen throughout the entire process. But then it'll go to an encapsulator in a giant barrel, and then the encapsulator will pop the top off that, and the nitrogen, being lighter than air, just goes poof. So now all of a sudden that fish oil instantly starts to oxidize. I like to use fish oil, especially from the KD Pharma group, that uses argon to blanket their oil, so it stays oxygen free through the entire process of concentration into a barrel, in the shipping, and then even when it goes to the encapsulator and they have to test it to make sure that it's not rancid, that it meets all of the GOED standards for all the minimum standards for acceptability for a consumer product. When you pop the top, that argon, which is heavier than air, just creates this nice little blanket of protection over the top of it. So that's not one. The big one, of course, is just looking at the data, right? When you test it, does all of the tests make sure that this product is not oxidizing and it's not going bad? I think the other thing too is put it in the freezer. That's a big one. Is just put your fish oil in the freezer.
So that's really a neat tip for our listening audience. You suggest putting your fish oil in the freezer.
Uh-huh. And there's really something interesting that you can tell about that too. When you put it in the freezer, if it comes out cloudy, you're going to be able to tell that it's got a higher percentage of those, those saturated fats in there. If you put it in the freezer and it still looks clear, then you're gonna have a better indication of how pure it is.
And I'm assuming that your product will come out clear.
Absolutely. 93.3% pure, or I guess 93.3% concentrated.
Really, it's that high.
Yep.
Great, great. Is there anything else do you think we need to talk about that we might have missed for the audience?
Yeah, it's you talk about omegas and it becomes the tip of the iceberg for a lot of other conversations. So we can spend a lot of time going over some things. You know your audience best, so I guess for me it's always a question of what information can we give people, as kind of the gatekeepers out there to help people really recognize and begin their health and wellness journeys. And I use that word a lot, but yeah, it is a journey. It's a daily approach to making sure that everything that you want to do in life, you're physically and mentally prepared to do. So I guess I'll throw it back to you. And if you have any other questions, I'd love to answer them.
Yeah, well, what products do you have other than the Alpha GPC with the omegas? Is there a full line of products?
If you go to Omax Health, you're going to see a full line of products. Probiotics is a big one, and we talk a lot about the brain, the brain gut connection. CBD, that's a fun one, and I've been really focused on CBD for the last couple of years, understanding the science, understanding the endocannabinoid system, and what that means. So I'm really excited to talk about the CBD product that we've got launching in about 2 weeks. I think that's going to be a game changer.
Yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's interesting that every cell in our body has endocannabinoid receptors. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
I mean, that shows you how, that there's something that shows you that there's something there, right? Because our cells wouldn't have receptors if it wasn't that important.
Exactly. And we're just skimming the surface on the potential of this stuff. And it's interesting because CBD is so much like omegas, right? You've got phytocannabinoids, this full spectrum phytocannabinoid with 113 unique constituent parts. And as we start to break those down and put them back together, there's a whole host of things that I think we're going to be able to tackle indication-specific response in the next couple of years.
Yeah, interesting. I'd love to have you back on at some point talking about CBD oil for sure.
Would love to. Got a lot of fun stuff we're doing with CBD right now.
Yeah, we'll do that in a couple months for sure. Once it's launched and ready and things, and you have a feel for how it's going, I would definitely have you back on. That'd be great.
Wonderful. I'd love to.
All right. So my final question I ask everybody is, what's the day in the life of Evan from waking to sleeping?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I last night I was on my 63rd flight of the year, so I'm averaging about 3 to 4 flights a week. So for me, waking up is usually where am I at? What city am I in? For me, one of the things that I found when we talk about brain health is do not make your phone the first thing you go to. Take the first 30 minutes of your day. This is me preaching, and I'm going to hop on this pulpit for a second because this is something that has made such a profound impact in my life, is charge the phone in a different room. Do not make it the first point of contact in your day. Get up, journal, meditate, work out, do whatever you need to do, but create a system that is you. That every day you do this, come rain or shine. And I think we're going to find that, just that alone is going to have so many benefits for our health. So that's what I do. I usually wake up, for 30 minutes, I'm writing, I'm kind of meditating, then I jump into the emails, then I jump into, the work, and that's usually lab work, podcasts, TV appearances, everything that my day consists of. About 3 o'clock, I got to head to the gym because that's where I go stir crazy. So from 3 to 5, I'm usually at the gym, and then back at it till, back to work until, 6 or 7. And then, if I'm in town or for for the 4 days that I try to be with my daughter, I'm with my daughter, and then the rest of the time I'm flying all over the world.
Jeez, that's busy.
Yeah. In bed by midnight, and then I'm up at 4 usually every morning. So I'm one of those weird people. I only get to sleep. I only sleep about 4 hours, but it seems to work for me.
Okie doke. It would never work for me, but I'm glad it works for you. Listen, Evan, thank you very much. My name is Dr. Noah DeCoyer, your co-host, and you are listening to the Beyond Your Wildest Dreams podcast. If you like what you've heard today, please share this with your friends and family and encourage them to subscribe on iTunes. Better yet, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please give us a 5-star rating. The links and offers for this incredible product will be listed in the show notes and as well as our website at www.beyondyourwildestgenes.com at the Listen Now tab. Thank you, and as my oldest son Hayden says, be awesome and never unawesome.
1, 2, 3, 4, get my shoes and out the door. 5, I'm alive. 6, 7, 8, feeling